It's that time of month again where we now talk about New World player numbers and what's actually going to happen in the short term and the long term. And the big question right now is, does the fact that they're going to be doing seasons and the season pass, is that going to make any difference with the player numbers? Now, the first thing we can have a look at here is the average number in February was 19,000 basically. Now this, by the way, still equates to a lot of players. I think maybe like 100,000. Jukesloft did a video where they effectively mined the leaderboard so that they could see the number of people who were completing stuff. I think like 15,000 people, for example, were doing wars, which is way higher than I anticipated. So whilst it's 19,000, just keep in mind that that's an actual average. Its peak in February, for example, was 32. And this graph at the top, well, this is obviously sort of like an hourly graph. So when I look at the peaks and troughs, I'm looking at the peak number for that day. But anyway, 19,000, and you can see in the last 30 days, it's actually dropped by another 1,000. So you can see just in the first 7 days of March, the average is lower, for example, than it was for the first 7 days of February. And this is a trend that is continuing, right? We all know what happened in October, November with Brimstone and Fresh. That was big. And now we all know that basically it's going down and down again from that peak, right? Everything in this graph here and everything below all makes sense. It's all something we're aware of. Now the question is, does season 1 make any kind of impact? And it's not looking like it is. Now the evidence for that is when we actually look at the Brimstone announcement, that came out around about August. I can't actually remember the exact date, but I think it was late August, right? And we can see it was actually the hype that brought people back, right? The actual Brimstone, I think only came out, I think it was like the 17th of October or anything like that. And Fresh obviously only happened then as well. It was the actual hype of the content that brought people back. And the question is, does the hype of season 1 mean anybody will come back truly? Well, the answer is looking like no. I'm on stream charts here and we can see absolutely nothing happened from this hype. No change in the stream numbers, no change in views, no change in anything like that. But we can see obviously Brimstone, etc. did have a change, and we can see that actually it started to go up about September like we thought. What I'm saying here is the hype led into the hype moment and it was visible. In fact, the only evidence I can find of any kind of spike is on Google Trends, which I don't necessarily treat as the most important thing, but you can just about see when we got the announcement of the expansion and season 1, then we did get a bit of a hype. Keep in mind that we actually got an expansion announcement at that point as well, so people are possibly excited for the expansion, but that's not bringing people back right now. And that's not retaining players right now. In my opinion, what this leads us to a conclusion is that the play numbers are actually still going to go down. Indeed, they are still going down. Now, it may slow the rot a little bit in the short term. Once we actually have the season pass, that might give a reason for people to log in. So we might see an increase in play numbers a little bit. But let's face it, it's not going to be a big turning point. Now, let me be clear. New World is not dead. New World is not really dying either. Regardless of what you think about an expansion and whether or not you'd actually pay for a paid expansion, we're scheduled to get an expansion at the end of this year, and that hype will be huge and you'll start seeing it around on the internet a lot more. The reason I made the other video about PAX Day was more that that game has similarities to New World in its concepts, rather than me just pooping on New World. I just did it in a way that was perhaps a little bit too clickbaity even for me, but you know, it is what it is now. So what's next? Where are we actually going to be heading? Season 1, as interesting as it is, for example, I think the new Expedition Imperium Forge looks really, really cool. I think a lot of the fact that we've had a lot of balance updates is really changing people's mind. It feels like this is a bigger patch than it actually is. It's basically a new expedition, of which we have quite a few already, and the seasonal story, which, if we're honest, lasts a couple of hours. However, that reward track, I do expect will take people quite a while, unless you're 5-head and just somehow miraculously blasting through it. I think most people it will actually take a couple of months, and in a way, that will be content. But I don't think any of season 1 is bringing back a mass amount of people. Might get some people back, but I don't think it's going to get a lot of people. And then season 2 is where I think things will actually start changing. The advantage of the roadmap is we can see it plainly now what's actually coming. The Sandworm Elite trial actually having raids, that's going to make the end game feel much better. Now people will say, just that on its own isn't going to bring people back, and I agree with that. Even Transmog on its own won't bring people back. But what I think we're going to get in summer is a trailer for the expansion. And whilst when we look on the face of it here, the expansion, it doesn't sound that interesting in itself, right? Keep in mind, they are definitely holding some cards back, right? There is no way, for example, I can see that the expansion will just be one zone being transformed. I don't see how you could have Brimstone and be so hyped and then for the expansion not do at least one new zone. I just don't see it, right? I'm pretty sure that expansion is going to have more stuff than we can see here. I mean, you can even see in the corner, it says that this roadmap doesn't include all planned content, right? right? And I believe that to be very true. But my point about summer is that we're getting raids, so the end game starts feeling a little bit better, and I think that's when the marketing for the expansion will really truly kick on. I think the Summer Games Expo, you know, what basically replaced E3, we're going to get a trailer there, I think, or around that time, and that's where the hype will kick back on. And keep in mind, it's the hype that really does the work. A lot of you be familiar with Ginger Prime. He has like his 3 cycles. I think they call them hype, grind, and bitch, and we're definitely in the category where people are going to moan. That's completely fine, right? And I actually think that this is part and parcel of game development these days. This cyclical nature is something we're going to have to expect. But I'm happy in a way that we're getting seasonal content, because it means you can always look forward to a little bit of snippet of content. Whereas we didn't really know that that was going to happen. We knew we would get stuff, but we didn't know when, we didn't know how long. So the cycle now is probably going to be like every 3 months, or like a small cycle. There'll be a little bit of hype like we saw with season 1, and then, you know, we'll grind it and then we'll moan about it again, and then it'll happen all over again. And then the same thing will happen, but on a bigger scale. We'll get a big expansion, the hype for that will be huge, we'll play it, everybody will be grinding it, and then everybody will die off and people go play other games and stuff. And then the next expansion, rinse and repeat, right? It's just the way things are going to go. And the season pass, well, let's hope that the money that they can take from us is going to be put back into the game, and we actually see, like, you know, just better game being created. We all want that, right? So no, I don't think season 1 is going to have a direct impact. It just doesn't look big enough for that to be the case. I do think its long-term impact will be interesting because of that seasonal cyclical nature that I spoke about. But really, I still think summer, with the raids, with probably the hype for the expansion kicking up, that's where I think we're going to start seeing player movement. I've said it before and I'll say it again. For me, the expansion is possibly New World's last chance. If they don't start making some good, positive, big changes to the systems that they've created that are pretty bad, then we'll be having different kinds of conversations, right? For now though, I hope you have a most beautiful day. If you want to support the channel and become a YouTube member or Patreon, there are links in the description. Otherwise, come and give me a follow over on Twitch. I'm having such a good time, and you know that it feels fine. It's where people find out that I am actually quite weird, and the oddity bit makes sense. But in my videos, it doesn't really come across, so that just is what it is. I hope you all have a most beautiful day though. You should definitely like and subscribe. Goodbye.